I proved to myself over and over again over a significant period of time that I was not able to stay sober on my own. And it wasn't because I didn't want it. I wanted it. And in fact, I was desperate for it.
Welcome to a special episode of the Mid-America PTTC podcast. I'm your host, Dave Clausen, and I'm the director of the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Center. Many of you know that September is Recovery Month, and in honor of that, we have teamed up with the Mid-America ATTC to share some recovery stories from right here in our region. Each episode is a unique and personal story. We are honored to have such amazing people offer their time and share their personal stories with us. Now, it's our hope that these stories will be a message that recovery is possible and that together we are stronger. Before we get into the content, we'd like to thank our funder, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Quick note, although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. All right, and I'd like to welcome Jamie to the podcast. Jamie, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Dave.
We're glad to have you. And now, for those listening, would you mind sharing just a little bit about yourself for us?
Sure. My name is Jamie Boyle. I'm president and CEO of the Welcome House, which is an 80-bed sober living recovery program for adult men in Kansas City. I live in Kansas City, and probably one of the most interesting things for me right now, I've got 4 kids. One I just moved into the University of Missouri for her freshman year. One who just got her driver's license, so she just turned 16. I have a 2.5-year-old son, and in January I'm expecting a daughter. So I've both ends of the children perspective.
Oh, well, that is exciting. January. All right. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That is cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show to kind of share your story of recovery.
Sure.
To get things started off, would you share a little bit about how has addiction impacted you?
Sure. I mean, that's a pretty broad question. I think it's probably in terms of the way I like to think about it. How hasn't it, impacted me? My drug and alcohol use started fairly early in my teenage years. 13, 14, 15, experimentation and really just doing what a lot of my friends were doing, pretty what I would consider to be normal, rite of passage kinds of activities, stealing a beer or drinking a wine cooler, smoking cigarettes, or ultimately, smoking some pot, and in a very social and kind of fun and free-spirited manner. But for me personally, I think that triggered something, and my body's way of processing and handling chemicals and substances is just different. And so that set me on a path that would allow substance use and alcohol and drugs to, for the most part, impact every part of my life. Some in very, very negative ways, and very quickly. And then ultimately, long periods of time where it was completely manageable and, at least in my own head, not really a problem for anybody. I wasn't doing anything that hurt anybody but myself. I know now that to be very false and not true. But ultimately, it led to a pretty significant collapse. A 4-year sort of fall off the cliff, if you will, where bottoms just kept getting lower, and, run-ins with the law, and, situations and events where my life was in jeopardy. And finally, to a place where I was I was at a bottom where, I was out of options. I was at that place the big book talks about where, I was at the jumping off point where you can't envision life with or without alcohol or drugs. And I was able to learn about a place called Welcome House, the organization that I work for today. I came to the Welcome House. It started my long-term sobriety, and in February I'll celebrate 8 years. So,
all right, okay, 8 years. That is something to be very proud of.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It wasn't me. I mean, the only thing I'll take credit for in that process is the fact that whatever reason, at my lowest point, I started listening and doing as I was instructed and told, and so that's I'll take credit for that to some degree, but the rest of it, it's the program, it's my higher power, it's my friends, family, social supports, recovery family supports. I mean, it's been a whole lot of people that have helped me get here. Really had not a lot to do with me, except in the sense that I became teachable and willing and, interested in saving my own life.
Mm-hmm. But it does sound like you had a good support system through your journey, and it coming back to the same trend in all of our interviews. Together we are stronger.
Yeah, I mean, I proved to myself time and time again over a period of years. For me, my disease was manageable until a point. It grew more and more difficult to manage, and there were certainly problematic episodes and events, but it got to a point of complete unmanageability. And I mean, when it wasn't manageable anymore, it really was not manageable anymore. And I proved to myself over and over again over a significant period of time that I was not able to stay sober on my own. And it wasn't because I didn't want it. I wanted it. And in fact, I was desperate for it. But I just couldn't do it. And so that's where family, friends, really initially more the friends and support system that I built within the rooms of AA and within a recovery community, because family and friends had gotten tired of trying to help. They loved me, but from an arm's length, and rightly so, because there was not much more they could do. And so it was my AA family and relationships and friends in the program that really were there, that surrounded me with sort of this support and hope and system of or style or this way to live that was enable me to start my recovery journey, and so absolutely a credit to those people and to the program, because without them, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Together we are stronger. Now you mentioned finding the Welcome House.
Yeah.
How did you find the Welcome House, or how did you find recovery?
It was I had really run out of options, and I had gone through a period of time, about 4 years of being unemployable due to drug and alcohol use. Sort of the 24-hour a day. If you've seen the movie Groundhog Day, that was really my life in active addiction. I was only really controlled or managed by my addiction and by my substance use, and I had run out of options. I probably could have sofa surfed a couple more days, but somebody mentioned the Welcome House, and suggested that I might look into it and consider it. And a friend brought me down here, and I sat in an interview and learned what the Welcome House was about, and thankfully decided to give it a try. And that set the stage and was the beginning of what would be a very significant and positive shift change in my life.
And it took somebody just mentioning.
Yeah,
the Welcome
I've
House.
I've lived in Kansas City off and on, but mostly on since the late '80s. I come from a family who's professionally involved in healthcare, and I had never heard of the Welcome House. It's an organization that's been around about 50 years. It was founded the year actually after I was born. It's at 27th and Paseo. If you know Kansas City, it's just east of Crown Center. And I'd lived here for years and years and years and years and never heard of it, and didn't know it existed, So
I think that's an important lesson for those of us working in the field, that don't assume folks know what resources and support's out there, and just share them.
That's 100% right. In fact, a lot of the work that we've done at Welcome House over the last few years has been building awareness, trying to introduce people to what we do here and how we can help.
Excellent. I love it. Now, you shared about the folks in your community, peer support, basically. I think it's kind of what you're getting at, that really helped you along the way. But what really made them stand out?
What made those individuals stand out?
Their help, their support for you along your journey.
That's really a 12-step AA/NA thing. That's been my path to recovery. I'm an active 12-step member, an active member of AA, and if you practice those principles around service and carrying the message of recovery to other alcoholics and addicts, if you follow the design for living of those programs, starting your day off with devotion, meditation, prayer, talking to other alcoholics and addicts on a daily basis, attending meetings, actively working with a sponsor. If you practice that program, you begin to learn that probably one of the most valuable or important things to the newcomer as well as the existing member is the fellowship and the support and the community within the group. We talked to the guys that are in the Welcome House program about getting out into the recovery community and attending events, picnics and dances and dinners and the meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting, going for coffee and building relationships. You want to have a phone that your contact list, as you scroll down it, is just full of people in recovery. And in fact, if you were to pick up my phone now and go to the contact section of my phone and scroll through it, probably somewhere in the 90% range are the people in that contact list that are in long-term recovery. I don't talk to them on a day-to-day basis about my own personal recovery or about AA or NA or anything really related to that. They're just my friends. We just, it's life. And, but we have this shared thing, this commonality, this I don't really want to call it I don't want to say challenge. It's really more, it's a commonality. It's this shared thing in life that we both struggle with and we're working through. And it's neat to be able to talk to people without talking about that issue and understand you're talking to somebody else that can relate to you, that's been there, that understands it, that struggles with some of the same things that you struggle with. I don't talk about recovery with those people, most of the time that we talk or interact or just go about life. But I always know in the back of my mind that if I needed to, I could.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes it that much easier.
Mm-hmm. They understand, they can relate without you having to describe and share all of the details.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
AA and NA are funny. We talk about stuff in those meetings that people who are not in long-term recovery, people who have not struggled with alcoholism or addiction just wouldn't understand,
Mm-hmm.
and we laugh about those things, and we relate to those things when other people share them. I all the time find myself listening to people who don't look like me, who haven't had the same life experience as me, who are from a different socioeconomic status or different ethnicity. And as they're talking, I'm hearing them tell my exact story, if that makes sense.
Yes.
They're
Mm-hmm.
telling Jamie's story, and that's the amazing thing about building a support and a network or a group of friends and contacts and people like that in your life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Building that support system, those friends, those folks you can count on. I keep bringing it up. The whole concept of together we are stronger. There's a lot of meaning behind that.
There is.
Yes.
There absolutely is.
So, what would you say is the best thing about recovery?
Wow, there's so many. It's so hard. Look, when I got to the Welcome House, I had lost everything. I had almost lost my life numerous times. I spent some time in a coma in the ICU. I'm a person who is from a middle class professional family. Everybody in my immediate family has at a minimum a master's degree, including myself. And so I had opportunities for interventions. I had people that cared about me, that were of means, that did everything they possibly could, and none of it worked. And it's not their fault at all. And ultimately, I lost it all after having built a fairly significant career and a life that, if you were to look at it from the outside, you might say, wow, he's got the world by the tail. This guy's got it going on. And my disease wiped it all out. And so now, I look at my life, and first of all, the best part about recovery, the very first thing, is that I'm alive, because without recovery, I would be locked up right now or dead. I mean, I believe that. I believe that in my core. And so the first thing is that I'm alive and I'm not locked up. But then beyond that, my life is so incredibly full today. Got an amazing job that I love. I'm remarried, been remarried now almost 6 years. I have all of my children in my life. I can be the dad that I knew and always wanted to be. I'm not the dad 6 beers into a Saturday, 6 beers in at a Saturday morning 9 a.m. soccer game. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm the present, available, accountable, responsible father, active and involved in the ways that I always wanted to be and should have been. I can be a good husband and a good son. They're just, of course, the possessions and the things in your life that make it enjoyable, the hobbies, the passions, all of those things have come, flooding back,
mm-hmm.
And then beyond all of that, if that weren't good enough, beyond all of that, I have a tool set available to me now that I didn't have before that allows me to deal with life. I can, as an alcoholic and an addict, one of the things that just almost by default, whenever I'm uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form, nervous, stressed, depressed, even quite frankly, celebrating or happy, my default reaction is to change that. I need to feel better. It needs to be better, and that for me, that what did that was drugs and alcohol. I couldn't sit with anything, Today I can. I can take the pain, and I can take the stress, and I can take the anxiety, and I can take, just living life on life's terms, because I have this tool set that the program's given me in how that I handle and manage those things in my life. That is probably the best thing.
It kind of comes back to what you were saying earlier about, following those principles, you'll learn a new way of living.
Right. And that's exactly what happens. And it happens one day at a time over a period of time. And, today I have a choice. I don't, before I came to the Welcome House, and in those, especially the last 4 years of active addiction, there was no choice. Using or drinking was the first waking thought for me every single day. And, the closer I got to the end, the less I was able to do in the day without using or drinking. Ultimately, it became nothing, and there was no choice. I was physically, psychologically, every way you could possibly be addicted, I was addicted. And now I have a choice. I'm not out of the woods. I'm not, no one is ever safe. I know I'm one drink away from a drunk. I know I'm one drink away from starting a process to be back in that very horrible Groundhog Day world of addiction. But I have a choice today. Today, I can decide I'm going to participate in a podcast and talk about my story and see if maybe I can be of service to somebody else. Today, I don't have to drink today, and I can go to my noon meeting that I usually go to on Fridays and enjoy that experience and see some friends and some people. And probably if I do those things, I already started today with my devotional and reading and prayer to my higher power. And there's probably a pretty good chance that I'm not going to get drunk or use drugs today. I don't know that about tomorrow, but I know that about today, because I have a choice to do those things and to help further my long-term recovery and my sobriety. That's an amazing thing for an alcoholic and an addict. The thoughts of using, the impulses, the triggers, those things have all over time diminished. It's not that they'll ever go away, because I believe that they never go away. I don't believe there's a cure. I believe this is something that I will deal with and have to face and address, and be accountable and responsible to the rest of my life. But it doesn't have to be what it was like in active addiction. No, it doesn't be that.
So that really leads into my next question. What would you say to someone currently struggling with addiction?
Well, as you can imagine, doing what I do, working where I work, that opportunity comes up daily, daily. And I see people here really in unending flow of men who are in very similar circumstances and in the end stages of their alcoholism and addiction every day, coming into the Welcome House desperate and looking for help. And what I say to them, and I believe this to be true, you got to want it. You really do have to want it. And what I mean by that is you have to have some level of desire and significant will
Mm-hmm.
to want to change your life. I can't, we guys that come in here, we can talk about the 12 steps and we can utilize the additional interventions and components of our program. We can help educate, help them along the rehabilitative process. But what I can't do is give them recovery. And what I can't do is sprinkle some pixie dust on them or touch them and deliver sobriety and long-term recovery to them through osmosis. There are actionable things. There are requirements of the program that they have got to be willing to do, and they're not going to do that unless they really want to be in recovery, unless they really want to change their life. Mm-hmm. It's not for everybody. I personally believe, and as the big book teaches, anybody can find recovery. The only ones that can't are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves or others. But when I got here, I was at a place where I was undeniably able to be honest with myself. Undeniably able. I looked in the mirror and I knew exactly what I was. I faced it, accepted it, and became willing and wanted and had this desire to change it. Mm-hmm. And so when I got to the Welcome House, because of that, I did what they said to do, even when I didn't agree with it, even when normally over the course of my life, I would have evaluated what somebody was telling me, and I would have decided why I thought it was bunk. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to do it, or why I was smarter than they were, mm-hmm. or why they didn't know what the hell they were talking about. But I decided to do it. And that comes only in my mind from a place of pure will and desire for change. Mm-hmm. There's a recovery is hard work. It's not overly complicated, but there are things that you have to do. You have to be willing to go to meetings. You have to be willing to get a sponsor. You have to be able to take direction and become teachable in this area that you've denied and believed that you controlled and could manage your whole entire life. In some cases, for me, it was, approaching 30 years mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. of active addiction, and so you have to be willing.
Kind of ties back to you were ready to listen, or you started to listen.
Right. Mm-hmm. What works best for us here at Welcome House, and we see this time and time again, and it certainly was the case for me. It was the perfect point in a person's life or their disease, the right message, and the right person delivering the message. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the formula that we see be most effective.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can see how all of those would be very, very impactful. Yes. Great stuff. Great stuff. I've got really just one kind of last question for you before we close this episode out. What would you say to those in the prevention, treatment, and recovery fields, that might not have lived experience? What kind of tips or advice would you offer them?
Without lived experience, meaning they're not in recovery themselves, or they're not?
Correct.
Oh, wow. God bless you and good luck. I don't say that in a flippant way. I can really only, there's a lot of great people out there doing very, very great and wonderful work and needed work in this field and in helping people either in prevention and education, trying to prevent the issue or the development of the issue or problem or abate that. And people that are case managers and social workers and clinicians and and all of that's necessary. And don't be discouraged. It. But what I can say from my own personal experience, it took every bit of what happened to me in my life to get me to that place. I've learned that bottoms get lower. There's this idea of a bottom. That means something to one person and something completely different to another person. I've known people in recovery that were people who were able to get off the elevator earlier, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to lose everything. They didn't have to have run-ins in with the law or legal or financial troubles or trouble with their employers. They were somehow able to, acknowledge, accept, and address the issue. Mm-hmm. And there are others that, you look at some of the stuff, myself included, that went on in their life and the problems that their addiction caused, and you just sit there in disbelief. I know my folks, were looking at me and my life and saying, Jamie, you've got an MBA, you have this great career with this great company, and why you're an intelligent guy. You're a capable guy. Why is it that you can't seem to deal with this issue? And they just sort of, it's just this level of amazement, and sort of disbelief with the struggle, and with the inability to address it. And, for me personally, it took somebody else. It took everything, all of the destruction in the path for me, all of my personal experiences, but it also took another person in long-term recovery. Mm-hmm. That's where a real impact for me was made. Mm-hmm. I sat across a table in my early recovery, actually with a couple of lay counselors or recovery coaches, not clinicians, not formally trained, but people who had 8 and 10 and 12 years of recovery, talking to me about their personal experience, sharing with me what was going on in their life and their thought processes and all of those things. And that's where I started to understand and see and hear what was possible for me. Mm-hmm. It was, I'm sitting across the desk from somebody who might have a high school education, definitely did not have a similar professional experience, but had what I could not seem to achieve, which was 8 years of sobriety or 9 years of sobriety or 15 years of sobriety. Mm-hmm. And for me that was the most significant part. So my what I would say is we need all the help we can get. Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Not discouraged if you're not able sometimes to affect everybody that you try to affect or impact. You are affecting people. You are impacting people. You are helping in tremendous ways that you may not even ever understand. You really.
Okay. And yeah, so sort of to summarize some of the highlights that I've picked up, the importance of making a connection with somebody, a peer, gave you that sense of that hope of what is possible.
Yes. And yes. And again, that's sort of modeling after the AA or 12-step recovery. That's in essence what AA and NA are. Mm-hmm. They're a guide for living. They're there are principles by which to live your life, but in essence, it's a group of peers.
Mm-hmm.
I sit in AA meetings with physicians and lawyers and business people and people straight off the street and convenience store clerks and cafeteria workers. And in the rooms of AA, there is no status. There are no titles,
Mm-hmm.
Alcoholics and addicts. My comments are no more important than anybody else's. And most of the time they're probably less important, and that's, there is tremendous power, in that environment, tremendous recovery power in that environment. I can tell you that in my personal experience, I have gained so much more in that space than through any other avenue. And I've been to rehab and I've talked to counselors and licensed clinical people, where there's been real effectiveness in my recovery journey. It's always been one addict or alcoholic to another addict or alcoholic.
Mm-hmm. Very, very powerful. And we hope that this podcast series can be a beacon of hope for somebody struggling with addiction and a reminder to the field, just like you said, keep trying, don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
Keep trying, never quit. Absolutely.
Yeah, my experience is my experience too. And I think that's important to point out. What worked for me, what was impactful for me in my life, might be similar for some, and for others it wouldn't be,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why, it is important to attack this issue, to attack this disease from every angle, and to do whatever we can.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know that if I'm effective, or the Welcome House is effective with a certain percentage of the guys that we serve, and we save or change their lives forever, that impacts their family and their loved ones in the community at large. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. If somebody else with a different approach also affects a certain percentage of the folks that they're working with, it has the same, broad impact. It's still saving lives. It's still, rebuilding families. It's still improving communities. So, it's the collective approach, I think, is what is we need to be focused on.
Yep. It brings to mind the ripple effect.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been amazing. So much power in your story. And so we want to thank you for taking time and being willing to share your story with our region. And again,
my pleasure, Dave. It's my pleasure. Thank you for including me.
Oh, absolutely. And we hope to have you back too. Keep up the great work there at Welcome House. And hey, thank you for being who you are. You're awesome.
Will do. Thank you, Dave.
All right. You have a good one.
You too.